And welcome back, everybody. Another edition here of Fridays with Phillip on the Auburn Undercover podcast. I am joined today, of course, by Phillip Marshall, and Jason Caldwell is with us for our Friday episode as well. Our post Media Days episode, of course, Auburn went on Thursday, the last day of Media Days. Back to tradition there. They weren't on the last day last year, but as I understand it, Jason and Phillip, that's usually the case, put Auburn on the last day. So we were back to that. Untraditional, though, of course, was the fact that it was in Dallas, Texas. So for full transparency, none of us were there. But Auburn still, we appreciate them for this morning. And Hugh Freeze, we had a Zoom call to catch up with him and do all the nitty gritty stuff that the beat writers want to do before he gets up and answers the big questions on the main stage. But Phillip, I thought it was a good day for the Tigers. That being said, I don't think anyone's ever come away from Media Days. Well, there might be a couple examples where you come away and say that wasn't a very good day, but has not been the case recently for Auburn. And I thought all three players represented themselves really well. And I thought everything Freeze talked about was, look, it was in line with what we've been saying all offseason. I thought it was, the right way to sort of preview the season today.
Yeah, I think that, coaches are in constant conflict. You want to excite your fans and create excitement, but especially for a guy who's going into his second season, you don't want to inflate expectations to an unreal level. And I thought Hugh did a good job of balancing that today. And but I thought it was pretty good. I really did, and I thought that he told a lot about some positions and stuff, and I guess it's the first time anybody's ever I guess he's ever actually said that Peyton Thorne is the quarterback. I think everybody's assumed it, and he hinted at it, but he said that today. So, but it was good. It's about like usual. I thought players, from what I saw, did a good job too, and I think it's really kind of fun for the players. They get all dressed up and to come and all that stuff. But I thought it was good. I didn't see anything negative about it.
Yeah, we had one thread on our board today. Wondering if Freeze said the Freeze might have been a little flat up on the stage, and I
think soft was the word he used.
Soft. I don't even know if that's applicable, but I get what they were saying. But my response or my thought on that, Jason, I mean, I was like, you haven't been paying enough attention to how Freeze has approached this job. If that's the low blood pressure is how he is attempting to survive this Auburn job. And look, like Phillip said, today was no different, and sort of laying out, here's what Auburn's strengths are, and here's what they think they're going to have to work on in the season.
Yeah, and I promise you, I don't know, I can't remember who posted it, but the first person who would be complaining if Freeze got up there and said, hey, we're fixing to win 12 games would be that same person. I mean, that's just the way it is. You're not going to win a national championship or an SEC championship in SEC Media Days, but you can do a whole lot of damage sometimes in SEC Media Days if you go out there. Look, Freeze, hey, he was, like you said, if you pay attention to him last year, he's about as straightforward and honest as it gets.
Yeah,
he said some things today that were absolutely brutally honest. I thought one of the biggest things of the day was when asked about kind of those, well, you're great in an underdog role. And he goes, look, hey, maybe I need to be a little bit better in those other games. And
yeah, exactly.
And here's the thing. Phillip and Nathan, we've been around these guys long enough to know they don't treat those games any differently. They don't treat New Mexico State any different than Georgia now, but you may have to do some things differently to get your players to treat those games the same. And I think that's part of maybe some of it. Maybe go, hey, maybe I should have been more, because there's no question you probably have to coach guys a lot harder to get ready for New Mexico State than you do for Georgia and Alabama.
There's no question about it.
So maybe that's part of that going, you know what, maybe I need to up my game. Not that it was down, but maybe I need to go a little higher on some of those weeks. And so I thought it was a little behind the curtain look at going, you know what, guys have been coaching long, but look, this guy's And I think about it all the time going, look, Nick Saban has coached a ton of football games. That guy still made mistakes. He still
Oh,
made
yeah.
mistakes that cost his team's games. Hugh Freeze going to be the same. I mean, everybody's the same. That's just part of it. So I thought it was very enlightening. But again, that's who he is. The guy sits up there and tells you exactly what he's thinking. Here's who we are. And I thought today he said, "Look, I think we're better. I think we got a better roster. Still got to do these things, and I, run the football, do those." I thought it was exactly what I expected it to be from Hugh Freeze.
Yeah, those games, New Mexico State. I mean, there are some games that you're just so much physically better than the other team that you're going to win regardless. But a game like that New Mexico State game, a team that was on a roll when they came in there, but if you don't get ready on Tuesday and Wednesday, it's too late. Ain't no pregame talk or anything going to get you ready. And that was a terrible performance. And I'm sure it still stings him. And but I think even coaches can fall victim to it. Coaches watch film. They say, "Well, we're better than this team at every position."
Yeah, and the difference is that could happen, and it has happened. Kirby Smart's done that. Nick Saban's done that. But when your roster is so much better, it doesn't matter. It doesn't show up. We saw Georgia struggling with UAB at times. We've seen Alabama struggle with who was it? Not Georgia Southern, somebody that ran the option on them a few years ago, Citadel.
It's Georgia Southern. Yeah.
But when your roster's so much better, it doesn't matter. Well, Auburn's roster wasn't that good last year. And so impact, it shows up a lot more when you ain't got as many good players as some of those other teams. So
yeah, right.
That's the goal. Go get better, and those games don't show up as often.
Right. But I thought that I thought Peyton Thorne was good. What he said, I thought what all of them said was good. I mean, Eugene Asante is a fascinating guy, and I was real interested what he said about that he called after his first year at Auburn. He called his old coach in North Carolina and asked him if maybe he could come back up there and be a grad assistant because this playing stuff isn't working out that well. And what really I took note of though, Deshaun Davis, right?
Yes.
Will Muschamp told me himself. He said he's a great kid, but he's not good enough to play in this league. And if Will Muschamp had stayed and Deshaun had stayed, I don't believe he ever would have played. But they had a change in defensive coordinators, and Kevin Steele gave him a chance, and he became not just a good player, but a great player and an all-SEC player.
Mm-hmm.
And but what happened to Eugene when he got here? They moved into the scout team and all that stuff, and then they had a change and fresh start, and he got his chance, and he took it and ran with it. And it happens a lot when there's coaching changes. Somebody that nobody expected suddenly blossoms. But I thought it was a good day for Auburn all the way around. It's funny though. I mean, usually there'll at least be 2 or 3 of the coaches of teams that are not expected of that'll say, "Well, I don't know. We've got this issue. We need to have more of this, and we got this issue." But I didn't hear, as best I could tell, listen to the coaches talk. There's going to be 16 great teams playing in the SEC this season, and I'm not sure how any of them are going to lose. but back in the days of Bear Bryant, wouldn't have been like that. He spent the whole summer poor mouthing every season about how they weren't near as good as everybody thought they were, and this and that and the other, and then they beat everybody. But interesting week. Interesting way to do it. And I've never done it this way like we did before, but it worked pretty well, I thought.
I felt like we, I guess everybody, for those you listening, if you're not on the site this week, we did a notebook every day. Each of us kind of had a team, or each of us had a few teams. I felt like I learned a little bit about the teams that I had to sit there and listen to the coach. So that's good. even though Auburn doesn't play some of these teams this year because the schedule got moved around a little bit. Yeah, I mean, there was like we talked about that answer from Freeze. I thought that was probably the most different and introspective thing that he said today. Like I mentioned, everything else was, look, this was in line with what we've been sharing all summer. We've talked to Freeze several times this offseason. We knew what the storylines were going to be going from the spring to the fall. Fall camp, by the way, starts August 1st. That is a quick turnaround from Big Cat Weekend. It'll be less than a week from that, but it's 2 weeks from right now. So be here before you know it. Yeah, Thorne, look, it's the ride that Peyton Thorne has taken from you look at 14 months ago. He's a Michigan State transfer. Then he's a late enrollee, gets here, tries to get up to speed, part of a quarterback rotation, rocky season, if not a pretty low, bad season in terms of SEC statistics. Then a bunch of staff changes. Phillip, he emerges from all this, still Auburn starting quarterback, SEC Media Days representative, kind of clear leader of the team. Freeze has done it several times. The team has done it several times, but they're hitching their wagon to him at quarterback and explaining the reasons why he can improve this season.
Yeah, I fully expected to improve this season. Not only was it the quarterback rotation and those things, but you had a really discombobulated situation on offense all the way around. And I think you originally intended to just let Phillip Montgomery take it and go with it. And then when he didn't like what he saw, he tried to get involved, and it became, as it usually does when you start trying to combine offensive schemes, it became a big mess. And I thought Peyton Thorne should have the way he competed against Alabama, not necessarily stats wise or whatever, but just the way he competed. I thought that said a lot about him. And but we'll see. I mean, he has shown he can be a big time quarterback. He's did it at Michigan State, and he seems to be a very bright guy, and his teammates seem to like him and rally around him. So, we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, Jason wrote about it today. One of the biggest reasons for that optimism and reasons for improvement. You can't deny the personnel around him is better at receiver. I thought something Thorne said. This is something he said in the main room. Jason, I don't know if you had a chance to go and listen to this, but he said, in working with these guys in the summer right now, they're catching passes that he thinks, oh, this one's a little bit behind. Then the guy makes a play and catches it. I might have put too much sauce on this back shoulder throw. The guy goes and gets it. Oh, this throw is at your knees. He ducks down and gets it. He just sort of said those weren't, not disparaging the guys last year, but sort of said these aren't plays that he's used to being made in practice. And that's where it starts for these guys this fall. It's going to be interesting, particularly guys like Perry Thompson and Lambert Smith. I don't expect Lambert Smith to need that much catching up. He's been a big time Power 5 receiver. Perry Thompson, that'll be interesting. But Jason, we've talked about it time and time again, and we're 2 weeks away from seeing it on the practice field, this fully revamped receiving core. I mean, Peyton Thorne's got a lot of toys to play with this fall when he's able to throw the ball.
Yeah, I mean, just the balls that should have been caught last year, not the balls that could have been, but just the balls that should have been caught.
Yeah, I agree.
Change things dramatically. I mean, you look up and Peyton Thorne's. I think we went back and did this where only 10 more passes and he's like 65% or something like that. Like it dramatically changes things. Okay, add 20 more where a guy goes up and wins a one-on-one ball or does some of those things. Because
he should have had 400 yards against Vanderbilt.
Yeah, I mean, those were plays that in this offense you have to make. And Cole Kublik was really good today. If people haven't been there were some things him talking about the wide receivers, and he's like, listen, the difference at quarterback when you have a guy where, okay, these guys are even, I've got to trust my guy to go win this, and you throw the deep ball. And the difference in that from a mentality standpoint, or, man, I'm going to throw this ball, but I don't know what's going to happen. That's a huge part of an offense. And
huge.
I mean, I'm thinking back to, obviously Bo Nix is a guy that we watched play a ton of football. Bo Nix was no different at Oregon than he was at Auburn.
Right.
That guy was ready to play when he stepped foot on the Auburn campus. He was no different guy than he was then. But you give him more weapons and you put him in a position to win, and all of a sudden it changes things. Now, Peyton Thorne's not as talented as Bo, but he's more talented than the guy we saw last year.
Right.
So I think you go something in between. We've seen Peyton Thorne when he had his running game, when he had a couple of guys outside that made plays. Michigan State won 11 games. I mean, he played really good football in was it 2021, 22, one of those years. Played really good football, 21, I think. 21, played really good football. And he's a guy that has shown that potential. And so there's no question that, to me, what Auburn's offense, because I think Auburn's going to run the football. I think, Jarquez is going to be good. Damari Alston, I like this offensive line group, tight ends. Rivaldo is going to be a guy. But to take things to another level on offense, your wide receivers have to go make plays. And this is a group that gives you a chance to do that. They did not have that chance last year and had that chance for quite a while, to be quite honest.
Right.
This group will give you a chance to go make some plays. Now, all of a sudden you do that, like Peyton said, you throw a couple of balls that aren't perfect and the guy catches it, and instead of 3rd and 10, you got an 18-yard gain, and it's the first time you're inside the red zone instead of kicking a field goal. Those are game-changing plays that they haven't been able to make. Now you got a chance with a few guys to make those. And I'm telling you, Sam Jackson's a guy that I think is dynamic. Robert Lewis inside, obviously Cam, Carter Lambert-Smith, Perry, Camden Brown. If he could stay healthy, there's a lot of options in this wide receiver room now. And we'll see some rotation, we'll see some guys, but that to me, almost the entire season hinges on that, because defensively nowadays nobody's good enough to go out and shut somebody down. 8 points a game. You got to go score points, and I think this is an offense that has a chance to do that better than probably any we've seen at Auburn in the last few years.
I agree. Probably a better chance than 2017, maybe 2019. But if you remember Bo, you talk about Bo when they lost to Georgia and the score was a blowout. Their receivers dropped enough passes for it not to be a blowout for sure. In Auburn, I'm talking about. So that had been 2021.
It's like 9 passes, I think.
Yeah, and last year, Auburn's ahead of Alabama, 21-20, and Thorne throws a pass in the end zone, hits his receiver right dead in the face mask, and he doesn't catch it. That's not the quarterback's fault. But it's going to be very interesting to see. I think most of my real questions, because I agree with what you said, Jason, about the offensive line. I think it's going to be pretty salty. My biggest single question is the interior on defense. And he said today, we got 6 guys in there that are going to have to play. Well, 6 is not very many, really, to have. This is all the interior defensive linemen we got.
It's just 2 spots, though. I think that's what I think he's just talking about 2 interiors.
Yeah, no, he said the interior.
Yeah, so it could be 3 deep on both sides, and they'll do some rotation. I do think they're better there than they've been in terms of depth the last few years. But you had Marcus Harris. You've had guys that were playmakers. Can you find a playmaker of that bunch?
Right.
That's the thing, because I agree with him. I think, to me, the approach is let's play 6 guys for 70 plays instead of playing 2 guys for 55 and 1 guy each for 15.
Yeah.
That I do think that gives them a chance to be better in late in the first half and late in games than they've been the last few years with that rotation. But you're right. Can they find somebody to create some push in the middle? That to me is the thing that remains a big question mark.
Marcus Harris, you mentioned Marcus Harris. He was a good player But last year he took it to another level, and maybe they got somebody that's going to do that this year. Who knows? You just don't know.
Bobby James and Travis. That's my guy. I'm waiting on him. I'm waiting on
All
him.
right.
Waiting on him to take the Nick Fairley jump. We'll see if he can take that junior college year 2.
Now, that was a jump. Nick Fairley was pretty good his first year at Auburn.
Not until the bowl game. It was really bowl game before he actually.
He wasn't anything like the monster that played.
No, not even close. He looked more like the guy that played offensive tackle for a lot of his first year.
Yeah, I just don't think, and Freeze's approach to that today, when asked about the position groups, he said, "Look, it's not going to be a comp." He doesn't even see it as competition in fall camp. It's not like, oh, who's going to win the. He's like, no, everyone's going to play. There are 3 starting jobs at each position. I just don't think there's that much, and maybe we'll see. Like y'all said, maybe somebody really steps up, but at those interior spots, I just don't. On paper, there's nobody. If Phillip Bleedy is maybe the guy, then I'm like, yeah, if he puts it all together in this defense, could be really good. But there's just not that much that separates any of these guys. Therefore, you would think, who's the last place player in the room? Is it Trill Carter? Okay, well, he still needs to be a good player for this team this season. Talk about somebody who is probably going to pop pretty nicely along this defensive line. We mentioned this last week on the show, Phillip, but Keldrick Falk, youngest player in Auburn history to represent the team at media days. And, I thought the comments from him and about him and his leadership were really, really interesting. The word that Freeze used was accountability. He said that is the most accountable guy on the defensive side of the ball. He said, that's not to say other people aren't good. That is the most accountable guy on the defensive side of the ball. And Freeze said, look, he's sort of an example that he can do everything, right? So Keldrick Falk has shown very quickly in a year's time that he is more than just a really, really good talent, which we know him already to be. And, Jason, I know he's somebody you've known for a while, coming up through the recruiting side of things. And for him to sort of take this step, I guess it's not necessarily a huge surprise that he is going to be a player that is counted on, but he said it today. He said, look, I think he sort of surprised himself. He said he wasn't a leader last year, was scared to use his voice. Said Marcus Harris and Justin Rogers kind of pushed him in the right direction, and now he's found it heading into this year as definitely the most important player on that defensive line, I think.
Yeah, no, and this is a guy that I think grew up last year, and he didn't really get to have much of a preseason. He had a hand issue that he'd been dealing with and some of those things, and so he didn't get to lift a whole lot. There's a lot of things he didn't get a chance to do, but even going back to his days at Highland Home, he was a guy that's like a lot of guys, and I'm going to date myself here. I was young, but my brother was a year older than John Hand in Sylacauga, and John Hand was a 6'7", 270-pound athletic freak of a guy who in high school football wasn't very good. Now, he was really athletic, but he was so big that he could just kind of do what he wanted to. And Keldrick was kind of always that guy too. You go like, man, he should be just pulverizing people, and it didn't happen. And John Hand went, and in year 2 and year 3 in Alabama became a guy that was feared, even with bad knees, because of his size. Keldrick Falk, we saw a little bit of that last year, where you go like, okay, that's it. In the spring, we saw more of it. And I think for him, it's learning – I can be that guy instead of, and I'm already that guy, because in high school, you're already that guy. I think last year he learned what it takes to become that guy in college. And he has a lot more of those tools than just about anybody else. And when I see him, I see Julius Peppers. That's who I see. If he can become a guy that's anything close to Julius Peppers this year, then it changes everything about Auburn's defense. Because if you have a guy like that, the good thing about him is, because of his size, he's a guy that can line up. He can play inside on passing downs. So I think that's something that gives you a little bit more. When you go third and long, you can move Keldrick Falk inside and maybe put one of the freshmen, Jamonte Waller, out there, with your pass rush guys. And so I think Keldrick is a guy that has, I think the next step in him this year. And if he takes it, then that changes the dynamic of Auburn's defense. And He's had a full off season. You look at him and you look at him and go, man, he's always looked like a grown man. Now he walks around like a guy that knows he belongs. Coming from a small school, it takes a little bit of time sometimes. I think he's figured it out.
Yeah, and I mean they needed somebody to step up there along the defensive line. Marcus Harris is a guy that sort of soft spoken. We love talking to Marcus, but he was a big time leader there. And like we mentioned, just lots of newcomers along that defensive line, lots of veteran experience coming in from the portal, lots of young talent, but Falk is important falling in that middle category of returning guys. And look, somebody like Zeke Walker too. He was pretty good at times last season. I'll be interested to see what kind of step he can take.
That's a guy that was supposed to be something special when he signed, and just never has really managed to get it going.
Yep. Almost left twice. He'd entered the portal one time. Then we talked to him in the spring. He said he almost left again. So I mean, he's dealt with a lot of stuff, and turned in a couple nice performances. I think Arkansas and Vanderbilt were pretty good to him last year. So we'll see. Yeah, absolute freak of an athlete. So yeah, but we will kind of move on, you guys. I think from media days, if you guys our listeners are still kind of looking for some media days content to chew on, auburnundercover.com. We are going to have. I mean, as you're listening to this on Friday, there's going to be a lot of stuff today. There'll be a lot of stuff tomorrow. There'll probably be even more stuff going into Sunday. We're going to have a lot of content from media days, but a couple other topics we wanted to get to on today's episode of Fridays with Phillip. Phillip, you wrote about it a couple times this week in your columns, your takeaways from the different days about Texas and Oklahoma. But we talked about this last week. We knew they were going to roll out the red carpet. It was comical sometimes, not unexpected, and then you consider where they were. I thought Freeze was going to lean a little harder into his joke today. He kind of backed off it. He said, "Wait, Texas and Oklahoma are in the league." That would have been pretty good. That would have been pretty good if he had just left it right there. Because every single coach was obviously asked about it, but it felt a lot different. Phillip, seeing Sarkisian and Brent Venables get up there, and those are two teams that are expected to be pretty good. But I guess just your thoughts on the first major grouping of the SEC teams all together as a 16-team league.
Well, it's to me, it's kind of a fascinating thing to watch. It's completely different than any of the previous expansions. When it was basically just welcome, great university, great this, we're glad to have you. I mean, it became such a show, and Texas. I don't know how to exactly say this. The Texas attitude is truly unique. You would think that they had been just dominating for years, when in fact they've had 4 losing records in the last 10 years. It's been a long time before last year that they were good. Now, they've got a whole bunch of players, and they might win this conference. Now, I'm not saying, but they just do things that just like Steve Sarkisian, who I like, saying, "I think Arkansas hates Texas more than they love themselves." That's just more of the same of we're Texas. Or 5-7 sucks if you're in Austin, Texas. Well, 5-7 sucks if you're in Auburn, Alabama, too. Or Athens, Georgia. Or hell, start with Mississippi. Nobody wants to go 5-7. But I was extremely impressed with Oklahoma. I really was. I thought that he did a masterful job at the podium. I see why a lot of people, Brent Venables, I'm sorry, I didn't say his name. Brent Venables did a masterful job. I could see why people were interested in hiring him. Now, that doesn't win you any games, but I was really impressed by him.
Yeah, you wrote about it in your story that day, Phillip. Like, Venables is not, and Sarkisian for that matter, not outsiders by any means to this league. I mean, Venables' list, you can read it up and down of and Clemson, met SEC teams like probably on an average twice a year. I don't think. I think how are they going to just
to the league, I think they will adjust easier than some. But here's the thing I think that's different. I mean, yeah, everybody's got good players and all that stuff, but the fact that everybody has good players and just the grind of it's certainly not like that in the Big 12. The grind of week in and week out, you better be at your best or you'll get beat. And that's pretty tough. And that's what Nick Saban did was so impressive. What Kirby Smart has done the last 3 years has been so impressive. Because that's hard to do. And really, to be honest with you, to do it, usually somewhere along the way takes just the bounce of the ball going your way. You're just good fortune. And that's true of anybody. You look at any undefeated team, any great team, usually somewhere there's a game in there where, like I said, the ball just bounced their way. And, Alabama didn't have anything to do with the fumble punt against Auburn, except recovered it. And if he just catches the ball, then Auburn wins the game. But I think they'll find it. I think it'll be different in that respect. But as far as lining up mano a mano and good players, I don't think they'll take a back seat. I think they'll match up just fine probably, and it just will make the whole just make it that much more interesting. And it's going to be such an interesting season anyway. In that it's going to be a different season than any of us have ever witnessed with 16 teams and no divisions and 12 teams in the playoff.
Everything's different. You're right. It's such a different feel. You're going into a season, and I keep having to remind myself that I was like, we're heading into SEC Media Days. I'm like, I don't really have to pay attention to LSU or Ole Miss.
The Mississippis, it felt weird. Yeah.
I mean, like you don't have to pay attention to those teams much because, by the time you have to worry about that, you would have seen them for 12 games if you were to face them in an SEC championship game. Yeah. So the differences in how it feels, and hey, let's face it, this is as different an Auburn schedule as there been in my lifetime, and anybody's lifetime, because there's never been one like this. And so it has such a different vibe that I don't know. But Phil, I agree. There's no question that from a talent standpoint, Texas and Oklahoma are going to stack up. Brent Venables knows. He's played Alabama from his days at Clemson. He knows what it took to win those games. Mm-hmm. And he went out in the portal and got some transfer guys on the defensive line to beef up that group. Texas, people have always said the biggest question mark for Texas was line of scrimmage, and it wasn't size and it wasn't athleticism, but were they nasty enough? Were they like, because you got facilities at a lot of Texas high schools that are better than anything outside of the SEC. So you go like, man, you don't have to grind to get to where you are a lot of places. Now you might work hard, but it's different working hard, in a 35,000 seat stadium and doing all those things as it is out there when you're got gnats and bugs and everything you're dealing with in a small school or whatever. But Texas has gotten some guys, and that line of scrimmage was really good last year on the defensive line. They got to replace some guys. They got to replace a lot of skill players. But man, they got quarterbacks. They got a guy who, when he has pieces, is a really good play caller and does things like that, makes them a dynamic. Oklahoma, because Auburn's going to face that team. Jackson Arnold is a guy that's ultra talented, but a very, very small sample size.
Yeah.
He'll have some time to get prepared for that first road game, but Tennessee will be coming there. There's some things that you still don't know, and so it'll be you're right. There's so many questions. Can Auburn goes to Missouri? Can they handle being the hunted? They have not been the hunted in a long time. Can they handle being a team that now everybody expects so much of? That's a difficult thing to do, to go from, we're going to sneak up on people, to all of a sudden going, you ain't sneaking up on anybody any longer. It changes the dynamic.
It's just interesting that people are going to have to come to grips with the best teams having losses. I mean, what Georgia plays Texas, yeah, Georgia plays Texas at Texas. Alabama plays at Oklahoma. You talk about games at Tennessee, at LSU. I mean, teams are going to have losses. It'll be a monstrous accomplishment to go undefeated. And it'll really be a monstrous accomplishment if they go to 9 games, which it sounds like they're probably going to do. But it's just going to be different.
You're talking about Georgia. Georgia plays at Kentucky, at Alabama, at Texas, at Ole Miss, and Florida and Jacksonville. I mean, that's a strong schedule, even for the team that is the most talented team probably in the country. To go run through that, if you run through that, they might as well like, hey, we're just not going to play the playoff. Just go ahead and do it, because if they get through those guys, then that's going to be the best team in the country.
And Oklahoma, I don't have their schedule in front of me, but they got a brutal schedule too. And a lot of very difficult road games, and it's just going to be very interesting. I'm looking forward to it as much as I have any season in a long time, just because it's going to be so different than what we've witnessed before. And then you get to the SEC championship game, which it's interesting because it's really big, because the winner of that game, be it the first place team or the second place team, the winner of that game is a top 4 national seed. But the loser then would probably be the 5 seed or something. But the next, whoever it might be, SEC team to get in, the third SEC team to get in, they didn't have to mess with the SEC championship game or any of that stuff. So who would you rather be, that third team or that second team?
Yeah, I know.
I think I'd rather be a third team. And so it's just, and I don't see the SEC ever doing away with the championship game. It makes
too much money involved.
Yeah, and
you're talking about Oklahoma schedule: Temple at home, but then Houston at home, Tulane at home, bye week. No, take that back. Then Tennessee at home, but then they're at Auburn, Texas after a bye week in Dallas, South Carolina at home, but then at Ole Miss. Then 2 weeks later at Missouri, Alabama at home, and then at LSU to finish the season.
That's pretty tough.
But that's the funny thing about it. You look at everybody other than Ole Miss. To me, Ole Miss, and the more I look at it, to me, Ole Miss should be a team that people pick to be in the SEC championship game, where I could see it, just because you have to factor in schedule. And Ole Miss schedule is better than anybody else in this league.
Missouri is pretty good too.
Yeah, I think Ole Miss has the best schedule in this league to go make a run. And so there's some very difficult ones, and they still got some tough games. But, man, most every tough game for Ole Miss is at home, and that should be an advantage for them.
Big deal, yeah. Yeah, it's just that it's going to be different for Auburn because, I mean, since 1992, Auburn's played LSU every year. They've played Ole Miss every year. They've always just about played Mississippi State every year. They've always played Georgia every year. But then you go back and go further than that when they play Florida every year and Tennessee every year. And now, at least this year and next year, it's just kind of helter-skelter. And it's just going to be different. And it's unfortunate in that Auburn doesn't have, other than probably Oklahoma, Auburn doesn't have another, what it would appear at this point to be a monstrous game at home. I mean, they play good teams, obviously, but they don't. It's not like playing Alabama at home or Georgia at home or.
Yeah, Oklahoma becomes that game if you do what you do the first 4 weeks.
Right.
Then it becomes that game.
I think Cal's dangerous. I don't expect them to win, but I think they'll be dangerous. Is Missouri? No, the first 5 games are all
Arkansas after that. So you got some games that are potential games, depending on, again, if Auburn is what we think they could be.
Yeah.
then those are games you win unless you make a bunch of mistakes, in my opinion. But you got to go be who you could be and not just potential.
Right.
Yeah, I think A&M is the other. Maybe they could, like, because of where it's positioned on the schedule. That's pretty much it, though, because no offense to ULM or Vandy, but they are not going to be that. And so A&M is the only other one that could give you sort of a marquee late season home game. But A&M schedule's not too bad either. I went and looked at it as y'all were talking. The easiest schedules in the SEC, according to FPI, are Missouri with the easiest, LSU, Ole Miss, Arkansas, Texas A&M. The toughest schedule in the league is Florida. Okay, then it's
Yeah,
just
as it stands today. But the problem is, that's all based on last year.
Yep.
You don't really know. And
Nope.
But Billy Napier seems totally convinced that they have turned the corner. I'll have to see it. But it's unbalanced schedules there's just nothing you can do about them, and just the way it is. And so, but it's going to be fun to watch.
Well, as we discussed last week, Phillip, sometimes it's impossible to project because I don't know when Florida's scheduled to play UCF, but maybe they weren't even a power conference team at that point.
Yeah.
Miami is so right now. Maybe 4 years down the line, Cristobal has them as like a top 10 team. So it's like you just never know.
Well, I mean, we've seen it, the ultimate example of it. Auburn scheduled USC, and
That's exactly right. I was going to say the same thing.
When they schedule USC, you go, oh man, that's going to be a pretty winnable game. It'll be a big name game. USC have been good in years, and you show up and you go, okay, they okay last year, and you show up and go to LA, and all of a sudden you go, Carson Palmer's showing out. They got all these guys, and all of a sudden you go, that's a different world. That's not anything close to what you scheduled when this thing was supposed to happen. And so, yeah.
Was it all those games against Clemson?
Yeah.
Same thing.
Correct.
Yeah, how long ago were those? Because they started playing Clemson pretty consistently, like the early 20s.
They used to play them very frequently.
Used to play them a lot, and Clemson was always Homer's homecoming for a long time.
Yeah.
And then
they hosted them in 2016. They're the number 2 team in the country.
Well, they played them in 2010, and that was kind of started. And
Clemson honestly should have won.
Should have won the game. Dropped a pass that would have beaten Auburn, and Auburn wins in overtime. And but yeah, you run into a run there for Clemson. But yeah, you're right. You don't know, and especially now, that's the thing. You don't know from year to year because the teams are so different. You think you know, but you don't really have any idea.
Well, I mean, it's teams are now most of them, at least, or a lot of them, are one year at a time teams. I mean, that is absolutely true in basketball. But when you, like in basketball, when you manage to keep it together, keep players together, and all of a sudden you got 4 or 5 seniors that are good players and maybe one that's a great player, and all of a sudden you're real hard to beat by anybody.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see down the road. This is completely off topic, but like with the UCLA news last week, we'll see if Baylor and Miami, if they stick on the schedule. Miami is a team that I wonder, like the 2030 they play them. I like Mario Cristobal. He's recruiting really well. Like, does Miami make a coaching change at that point, or are they like ACC power, or what conference are they in? We have no idea.
In 6 years, heck, right now with the way this thing now, it's going to change, but you're still going to have transfer portal, and you're still going to have NIL. The way this thing's going now, there may not be anybody coaching in 6 years that's coaching today. You have no idea.
It's man. I mean, just look at the former SEC West. Alabama's got a new coach, first-year coach. LSU, Brian Kelly's been there 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Hugh Freeze has been at Auburn for 1 year.
Mississippi State first year.
I mean,
Texas A&M first year.
Even though they make a bunch of money, it's a tough business.
Well, and you're right. When you go 16 teams and everybody's good, everybody ain't gonna win every game, and so there's gonna be a lot of teams that lose a bunch of games, and it's gonna come with the territory.
Yeah.
Nathan, you're talking about those schedules. I for a long time I've questioned would they still be on there. After hearing Greg Sankey this week, I'm not so certain that SEC doesn't stick with 8 games.
They may.
And if they stick with 8 games, those games will stay on the schedule because you absolutely are going to want that 9th game to be another Power 5 game.
I think it seems like Sankey may be playing a game of chicken with ESPN about that.
Yeah, it feels like it.
If you want us to go to 9 games, and
I do think there's one thing that's true. We've got to see how that impacts the playoff. Does that extra game make an impact on who gets the playoffs?
That's what they said at spring meetings. They said they wanted to give it a test run for a season and then see if
it does. Then you'll do it. But if you're still getting in and hey, that 10-2 team gets in, and that team that lost an extra conference game is 9-3, and you're still getting in over them, you're like, why would I add that game? You're already getting paid a bunch of money. So I don't know.
I mean, if you add a ninth conference game, that's 8 more losses, I guess, right? Because you'd have 16 more games somebody win or lose. That's significant. And but like I said, if ESPN wants them to do it, willing to pay them to do it, I'm sure they'll do it. But I don't know how important that is to ESPN or not. But TV's got a lot of sway these days.
Yep, that's as is always made very apparent by SEC Media Days. It's kind of the master class for college.
We're talking about these strange games for Auburn, and then it made me think about, we do have USC at Rutgers, and we have Michigan State at Oregon, and there's some other ones that UCF at Utah. That's a conference game. Yeah.
How about I don't know who's on their schedule, but how about Stanford or Cal at Syracuse or at North Carolina? I mean,
I think
or Miami.
What about Miami? That's right.
I think
the Cal football schedule. I mean, obviously they come to Auburn, so they're already coming across the country anyway, and they said like the road trips that they have. They come to Auburn, they go to Florida State. So they have that one. Miami's got to go to Berkeley. So Miami's got to go to Berkeley on a Saturday. If they play that game at 8:00 at night, Miami, I mean, that's brutal. So, but Cal's got to go to Pitt. They got to go to Wake Forest, SMU. That's unbelievable travel. That's insanity.
Stanford goes to Syracuse, Clemson, Notre Dame, NC State, Cal. And they weaseled San Jose State in there. But Stanford's first ACC road game is at Syracuse. I don't know how far that is, but
somebody. Here's
the country.
Somebody did the estimation.
miles.
Somebody did the estimation of miles for Cal.
I think it was like 50,000 or something, wasn't it?
22,000 miles.
Yeah, it was had that, and then Josh Pate was like, "Yeah, the Earth's circumference is like 28,000 miles."
Somebody said they will travel 83% of the Earth's circumference to play a football season this year. 83%.
World travelers.
I just don't know if that's. I mean, we talk about a lot of things sustainable. Is that sustainable down the road too?
Yeah. Well, they got to start paying a bunch of money later.
Yeah. So I mean, it's gonna. It just reinforces the craziness of what we're heading into, and I think so much unknown that it's going to make it pretty wild.
I agree.
Well, speaking of what we're heading into, fall camp here in just a couple weeks, August 1st, Hugh Freeze confirmed that'll be the first day of fall camp. That is a Thursday. Players will report the day before. No drama in terms of summer reporting. We're used to having a couple guys. Jason, I think we're good. I think we're all good this time around. Your guy, Bobby Travis, talking about taking another year. He'll be glad just to be on campus more than 2 days before fall camp, because I'm pretty sure he reported 2 days before camp started last year.
Yep.
But none of the no such players this time around. Phillip, I have become very accustomed to what fall camp looks like at Auburn. I've been out there on the practice field since 2018. It's all looked pretty similar to me through the 3 head coaches that I've covered. But when you go out there, when you've been out there in the spring and now getting ready for fall camp, what are some of the biggest differences on a daily basis? Not just from what you observe, but just the football aspect of things that you see.
I mean, you're talking about freshman reporting. Really, 20 years or so ago, the freshmen all reported on the same day. It was very unusual for players to enroll early, and they all reported on the same day. And we even got to interview them all.
We talked to them all.
Yeah, and which is where Willie Northern, who was a wide receiver from the Panhandle, Quincy, Florida, I think.
Yeah.
Proclaimed he was going to be the best receiver on the team. And
Antoine Nolan.
He didn't back that up. Antoine Nolan on the practice field. Northern catches a pass, and Antoine runs right by him and just takes it away from him and runs the other way and points to the weight room is that way. And Willie didn't. He was gone after that year. I think he ended up playing safety at Indiana. I think, but I remember when Cadillac Williams signed. Somebody asked him, said, "Do you expect to be the starter?" And his response to questions his first day said a lot about him. He said, "Man, I haven't proven anything to these people here." He said, "If I'm supposed to be the starter, I will be." And then somebody asked him, said, "Well, were you promised when you were being recruited that you would be the starter?" And he said, "Man," he said, "that's just recruiting talk. I don't even know." And but it was we got, like I said, we got to talk to all of them. But from the actual two-a-days, or what it was always called two-a-days then, because if you go back to Jason, when did Auburn switch from the quarter system to the semester system?
It was probably mid-'90s, late '90s, something like that.
Before, at one time, the rules were that there was a limited number of days you could practice, but you were considered to have, if you weren't in school, you were considered to have 2 practice opportunities a day up till the first day of classes on the quarter system class, or the week of the opening game. And on the quarter system, classes didn't start until past the middle of September. And so Auburn didn't have near as many days to practice as a team that was on the semester system did. Drove Coach Jordan crazy, absolutely crazy. And but it was also so different. And the two-a-days were at least two-a-days, and there weren't really many rules about how long or anything else. Coach Dye sometimes would have 4 practices a day. Now, one of them was usually a special teams practice, but he would have 4 practices in a day, and they could put on pads and blast away anytime they wanted to, and they did. And I'm old enough to remember when they didn't want to give you any water. Gave you some salt tablets. It's amazing more people didn't die.
Well, they were outside in the heat all the time. They were a lot more used to it, for sure.
But also, some guys, because everybody went home for the summer unless they had to stay in school to stay eligible. And they sent a workout plan, and some of them would do it and show up in good shape, and some of them wouldn't, and that's who it was really tough on.
Yeah, that's the thing that I think about now is that the first 2 weeks of preseason camp or fall camp were to get guys in shape and ready to play.
Yeah, and you don't have to do that.
Now, if you're there and you're not ready, it's over with for you. You're not playing.
Yeah,
and so that's why everybody's now on campus, because if you're not ready, because they don't. I mean, they don't run nearly as much and do like they used to run sprint after sprint after sprint and gassers and do all those things because they're trying to get people in shape and ready to go. Yeah, they don't. That's the biggest difference now is that there's so much of that involved in two-a-days, and now it is you hit the ground running, and you are running your offense and defense from the moment you step on the field.
Yeah,
on the first.
it's and there were a lot of coaches that really were distressed by as the rules started to change, first to limit two-a-day practices, and now they're almost gone. A lot of coaches were really distressed about that, but actually, I think it's better. I mean, I think it's safer for sure.
Yeah.
Oh man, when it's 100 degrees out there, that's a tough thing. And of course, Auburn's gone through having a player pass away before, and it was very traumatic, obviously, for everybody. But you can't. But at that time, also now, if you would probably have an actual medical doctor out there.
Oh yeah.
At that time, you had a trainer out there. If you had a medical doctor out there, maybe he might see and say, "Hey, this kid's in distress. You got to get him out of there."
Well, now these guys wear, monitors and these things, so they measure how much they run. They know if this guy so they're able to measure those things. And hey, there's heat. They measure heat and all the things that you go into it as well. So yeah, very different. But hey, it's almost here. It's almost football time.
Yeah.
Looking forward to seeing what happens.
Me as well.
Interesting fall. Something we didn't even talk about was Freeze in the play calling. Not a big surprise. Sort of mentioned that it would be a joint effort. Said Derek Nix would handle a lot of the early down stuff. Ken Austin as the passing game guy is his third and long guy. But read between the lines, people. Like it is a little bit more of his operation and his focus this time around. But it's still going to involve his coaches.
One thing people don't understand is that the plays you're going to run, it's not you don't have a coach just sitting there saying, "Well, let's just try this." I mean, they got first and long, they got this. Second, that's decided the week before the game. But I think he probably, I'm sure Derek Nix wanted to have that he's at least part of the play calling operation if he's the offensive coordinator. And but as Hugh said today, I don't have a single coach on my staff that hasn't worked for me before, and I think that's big for him. I think he feels a lot more comfortable than he did last year.
Yeah, it's not even close. I think that's a big part of it. And you're right.
I'm not sure why he didn't do it last year.
Yeah, I think the big part is for him will be red zone. I think that's where you start to think about specific things, building on things. To me, that's where I believe he will be more involved in the actual play calling duties. Then I think that's where you'll see him. But he said, I'm going to be in meeting rooms. I'm in the offense. He wasn't doing a lot of those things last year.
Right.
It's his offense. He's involved. These are three guys that have worked together before and know each other inside and out. I think that's the big difference.
I agree.
Yep. Yeah, Patrick, our boy Patrick Bingham, who's interned for us and is going to intern for us again this fall, I thought asked the best question in the main room about, Freeze put a lot of his time on game days, not on the game. He was the first to admit that last year. And so he asked, what is that going to look like this year? And Freeze said he expects it to be about 70-30, 70% game planning, offensive meeting rooms, and 30% towards recruiting and general sort of team management.
I would think that's probably true of most coaches, even ones that are heavily involved in play calling and stuff. But you still got to recruit. I mean,
yep.
You can't say we'll see you in January.
Yep. And once this 25 class is done and it's probably a top 10 class, they'll turn right around and he knows they got to do the same thing for 26. So that side of things definitely never slows down. But I think we'll call it there, guys. Getting right up to an hour of recording right about now. So we appreciate everybody for listening today to the show. Phillip and Jason, appreciate you guys for joining, and another episode of Fridays with Phillip in the books. I enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you guys later.